On my computer. There we go. So good evening, everyone. It's Jim again from FP UK, and this is our fourth night now of the 14 days of Christmas. Tonight, I'm very honoured to announce Ruth Bolton. Now, yesterday we had what can only really be described as sort of the Star Trek of fountain pens, all about highly refined precision manufacturing techniques and sort of metallurgy and microscopy and kind of really advanced high-end tech. Tonight we're going in a different direction entirely. We're really talking about kind of the high artistry of fountain pens, which is hand turning ebonite, which is a buggerer material, and using beautiful Japanese urushi techniques to create pens that are, I mean, honestly breathtaking. Ruth's business, Shibui North, is based up in the northeast. Shibui means both subtle and refined, as well as rough and rustic. So when you look at her two most recent pen releases, you can see that really kind of that shining through on both. With her, I think it's the Yakutsuki finish ones, which would kind of be the rough and rusticy type ones, and then the Urushi on ebonite finish, which are just incredible. Ruth is from the UK, but has spent, I think, 2 decades in Japan, and at least 10 of those studying Urushi with some Urushi masters over there, and has been making pens for about the last 4 years. So thank you for giving up your evening to talk to us, Ruth. The event tonight is sponsored again by Robert Oster Inc., so there'll be a bottle of that up for grabs. And I'm also sponsoring tonight's meeting via my website, Inky Dr. Jim, which I've had closed down for a bit, but I will be reopening fairly soon to do pen reviews and advice. And the lead prize for tonight, therefore, will actually be a model of the pen that I first reviewed for my website, the Izod's Paradigm, so an ebonite Mont Blanc 149 size fountain pen piston filler with an 18 karat gold medium nib. So that's a pretty cool prize, and we'll do a prize draw for that during the talk as well. So I'm going to hand over to Ruth. Ruth, the floor is yours, and please take as long as you need, and we'll go from there.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for coming and attending this talk. So it's hard to know where to begin. I've had like such a long process with Urushi. I moved out to Japan at quite a young age, and I guess for me, Urushi's always been a very ubiquitous thing. You know, it's very Japanese, it's everywhere. You'd be really hard pressed to walk into any store and find something without Urushi on it, to be quite frank. Just to talk a little bit about the origins, it's a type of tree sap. It's taken from the sunac tree, which I think is like equivalent to like poison oak. I'm not like a tree expert. And basically what they do is they'll grow the tree, and when it's about 10 years old, they score the tree with like a special blade, and from that they take the Urushi. And that's what I really love about this process. In the creation of Urushi, you need to grow trees, and you can't destroy that tree. So, you know, they cut the lines, they take the Urushi, and then that tree is left for another 10 years. So I really feel that like by keeping the art alive, I'm helping to keep nature alive, and that's become so much more important. And so for me, it's like it's a way for me to like keep my own connection with nature itself, and because you are using like a really raw, rough material. It's a tree sap. It's highly poisonous. I think in my whole life of using Urushi, I've had 2 very serious reactions to it. you know, most people aren't allergic to Urushi, but you know, you'll kind of like, you'll have a bit of a low day, you'll be feeling a bit ill, you'll just do that with your face, with your gloves on, and poof, too late, it's done. And but yeah, so I studied it in Japan, and the type of Urushi you study depends on the region that you're in. I spent most of my time in the Osaka region, and the tradition of Urushi in Osaka is black, with delicately drawn details of leaves and sakura, that kind of thing on top, but with decorated in gold or silver powder. And that's the really kind of Osaka style, which I'm technically a specialist in. But I guess that I've never really felt that my style's quite good enough for pens yet, to be quite frank. And that you find that in like And so so Kyoto is like here on like the west coast. You take a 2-hour trip across, you're on the east coast. You go to the east coast, that's your kind of Tamenuri style. And for the people who you don't know, that's kind of like a colored urushi with a kind of amber urushi painted on top, creating that kind of very unique look. And there's a special brush technique that you got to use for that, which I'm going to demonstrate later. It's very difficult. It's one of these things you're going to put on an item and you're going to find out a year later whether it worked or not. Because, basically urushi always gets lighter over time. So if you lose in a translucent urushi and you mess up, in a year's time, you're going to have a really unhappy customer who's got nasty big streak marks all over everything. And so apart from the East Coast, I also went up into the north, and your north style is kind of like your kawari styles. So like kind of like fish egg, nanako style, kind of like that creation of randomness. And like the sort of like the Kara releases, the Sabi Urushi that I've done recently, it is very northern. So for me, these are the 3 most styles that I'm most familiar with. Thanks to COVID, I haven't been back to Japan in 2 years, which has been really devastating with me, because like it's took away that opportunity to like study, to learn different techniques and new styles. And I'm dying to go out there, learn some new things and put it on a pen. And most urushi work in Japan is actually done in Ise, which is it's just kind of like north of Tokyo. So kind of like if you go north of Tokyo but south of Hokkaido, on the kind of like the west coast, that whole region is very famous for urushi. And pretty much any urushi item that isn't made in China will have been made in Ise. And so I've been talking too much. I've got so many things to show, and I'm talking too much. So I guess first I want to show you what raw urushi actually looks like. I've got my little glass base, and I'm going to put my gloves on. To be fair, I don't always use gloves when I'm handling urushi, but not doing so is very, very naughty. Because you kind of really bad reactions to this and break out in nasty rashes, and it's not very nice. The fumes as well are also quite dangerous. So you need to use this in well ventilated areas. So that's the PPE on. We all know about PPE now. And so your basic urushi comes in a tube like this. This is from Japan, Kyo Urushi. I've got too many tubes of it. Where is my raw urushi? So your very basic kind of unrefined urushi is called sudome, and I can't get the top off. Isn't that perfect? I want to get the top off. It's been a pain, I'm sorry. Needs a nice big jam with something sharp and pointy. So I'll show you the black stuff. So this would be raw urushi. It's usually mixed with iron to create the black. That's it there. This is your kind of really glossy black stuff. It's very viscous. So when you apply urushi, you've really got to think about the thickness. If you apply it too thick, it forms wrinkles, which look awful and doesn't cure properly. This is really important during if you're going to bake it in an oven, because if you get the thickness wrong, it just goes all horrible and comes straight off the pen. It just cracks off. So I'm just putting some. So that's one of the reds there. Believe it or not, even though this looks like it's a solid color, this one actually dries quite clear. So this is your black here. Basic black. That's the red I just put on there. So you see there's gold underneath, and you can kind of see the gold underneath. But you also get more solid reds, which I'm going to get now. So here we have a much more bright red, which goes to this color. But as you can see, there's a massive difference between the brightness of that raw urushi and the final color of the red. The Urushi is really bright. I wish I was good enough to keep it that bright. I really do, but I'm not. And then I've got some blue stuff here. So there you go, there's 4 different types, which are now threatening to drip all over nice furniture. So you have the red, black, the blue, and the kind of like glossy red. So the very first thing you learn as an Urushi artist is called fuku Urushi, which means wiped Urushi. And how this works is you take a wooden item. So this is a pen made from wood. This is tiger maple wood, or curly maple it's sometimes called. You polish the pen to quite a high standard. You apply raw Urushi, wipe it off, and you're left with this effect here. And what I quite like about Fukui styles is that it actually inverts the grain. So the areas that were dark are now light, and the areas that are light are now dark. And depending on how you apply, you get different techniques. So I'm going to show you. So this is the same piece of wood and the same amount of Urushi. But the top wood, the Urushi was applied on lightly and then quickly wiped off. With the bottom wood, this Urushi was actually rubbed into the surface to create a darker effect. So that's always what's really interesting about Urushi, depending on the technique, but also the conditions of how you cure it. You can create a lot of different effects. So I learned most of my Urushi techniques in Japan, and I came back to the UK and I had to learn how to adapt a lot of my techniques because I was in a different climate, I was in a different temperature. Urushi is really like sensitive to heat and humidity. And the general rule is higher temperature, faster drying time, brighter color, less shine. So depending on the effect that like you want to create, you got to think about what season am I in, what humidity do I want to set the chamber at, because to dry any Urushi pen, it doesn't actually dry, it cures. So you put it in a high humid environment and the water around it sort of polymerizes it and cures it and makes a hard innate surface. But every Urushi is different. So every color cures differently. If it rains, chances are you're going to ruin the whole batch because of the high humidity that day. And I have gone on, like in the first Kickstarter I launched in this group, to develop a technique called baked Urushi, which it is found in Japan. It's actually one of the oldest Urushi techniques, believe it or not. People think that because I'm using it on a metal pen, it's actually quite recent, but it's one of the oldest techniques out there. And I'm very sorry that I don't have any these aren't fountain pens. I do apologize in advance, but these were kind of like the bait technique ones. So this was amber Urushi on an aluminium pen. Then we have black on a brass. This was the sabi style. So basically what you have is this is a sea sponge, and you very lightly dab it on, and then you put it in the oven. And the temperature at which you set it at depends a lot on the Urushi. So this took quite a lot of experimentation of kind of finding that sweet spot. You put it in the oven and you blast it, and it significantly darkens the colors. But if it's black, you're not going to care because you don't get darker than black, right? But if it's red or blue, it's going to be absolutely ruined by the process. And I have a scale of temperatures and how high I can put things. So black, I can blast at 210, no bother. Blue, I've got a slow cook at 120. And it's been this whole experimental process of working out what color goes best in what oven. Yellow's horrible. That's why I've never released yellow. Yellow doesn't work in this climate. See, I have a yellow one here. Look at how dark that is. It's absolutely horrible. I've never got yellow right in this country, so I don't release many yellow pens. I think the only time I ever released a yellow pen was a while ago on a Kickstarter. This is a prototype here. Oh yes, sorry, yes, go ahead. Do you want to put on the volume? I've just got a comment saying, may I ask a comment about fuku, please, can't speak today. Go ahead, sorry.
Going back to your fuki urushi technique,
Yeah.
what do you actually mix your ki-urushi with when you're actually starting off? I've heard people like paraffin or using something else just to water it down.
Nothing. Not a mixture.
Urushi, do you?
I'm not a mixture. I understand mixing. I think it's a great technique for certain effects. I personally am not a mixer.
Okay.
I go for kind of like a very kind of raw, visceral finish. And I feel that mixing takes that away. I have seen other artists use mixing and use it very effectively. And when I trained in Kyoto, I used a lot of mixing techniques. But I definitely prefer it thick and raw, kind of as nature intended. You know what I mean?
Oh, perfect. I've also heard that some artists or artisans in Japan, they do all their layers to start with before actually even wiping it off. They actually just build up the actual layers of urushi and then sand after. Have you ever heard of this as well?
Yes, that's your kind of Kara techniques. So it's these techniques here that create these patterns.
Oh, fantastic.
So basically, like if you want to generate any kind of pattern, that's how you do it. You kind of well first you got to seal it with black, and then you bring in some sort of disruptor. So the disruptor for this design is a special spatula that I use to like kind of physically dapple on the red. Then I add the silver, then I add the blue, then I sand it down and polish it.
Would that be the same tool, which I'm sure you've heard of Bokamondo? In her logo, she's got a tool which I think is basically used for that technique.
Maybe every artist makes their own. See if I can find, hang on. You can't buy these things. Mine's like a spatula with holes in it. But yeah, so I can't find my spatula. I need to make a new one actually. So the disruptor for that was the spatula. The disruptor for this one was building up lots of uneven layers and sanding it down to create these kind of striped effects. And then gold leaf was over. And then this pattern here used seeds as a disruptor. And this pattern here used egg white as a disruptor. So that's very much the kind of like northern styles, to be honest, that you introduce. So thank you for your comment, Lucy. That you introduce something that's going to interrupt the layers to create a pattern, and that's why every pen's like unique. So like this one here, if you see up close, I kind of like painted with a brush on kind of like lines, and it's meant to be like a kind of like tree bark type thing. So yeah, just like sort of depends on what effect you're going to go for. Doesn't always work, unfortunately.
That last one which you showed, it's sort of reminiscent of what a sailor just did with their wabi-sabi pens, which they've just done. It's kind of like textured, and it's just absolutely fantastic. Really beautiful work, Ruth.
That's pretty, yeah. Like I'm all about like textures as an urushi artist. I mean, I know I spent like a lot of time training in Kyoto, like a really long time training in Kyoto, and I should technically be a maquillage specialist, but it never really spoke to me. And in a way, I never really found my voice until I went up to the north. So I trained in the Tohoku region. So I went to kind of like Aomori and that kind of region, and I kind of found these techniques. They're called Kara techniques, but that's a collective term. It's a bit like saying, you know, kind of techniques for applying black urushi. There's at least 50 of them, and that's where I kind of found it. And you always get an urushi kind of like, you get things that are generic, and you get things that are specific to a region. You get things that are specific to an artist, and I like to look for things that are kind of like specific to me, as opposed to like copying what everybody does, if that makes sense. Totally lost.
Jose, I think you had a question, or was that a legacy hand?
Oh,
No, I had actually several, but I didn't want to interrupt.
oh, you can interrupt. I don't mind.
But you mentioned before that you couldn't do the bright red because you weren't skilled enough, and I don't understand why. Like, what do you need to do to make bright red?
A lot of experience. So the kind of colors that like an Urushi artist can create depends on like the level of experience and how well they can mix it, how well they can cure it.
Okay.
I'm not in that path on my Urushi journey yet. I'm not there. I'll put my hand up and admit it. And that's why when like you look at kind of like the big names and they have these beautiful, bright and beautiful yellow pens and they cost $2,000. There's a reason for that.
Okay.
You know, you can't like I can't get a bright yellow and bright red pen like that. It takes years and years of training and understanding to be able to do that.
Okay.
You know, I wish I could. Maybe ask me again in 10 years.
I think there is a peak to what sort of brightness you can actually naturally achieve. I have heard from other Urushi artists that some of the companies like Pilot, they actually spray their actual lacquer onto their pens. Whereas in relation to, say, like Nakaya, they actually hand apply it. So you can see a definite difference between the actual colors of those companies. And I think a lot of it comes down to like the technique and the technology in which they're actually applying the lacquer at the same time.
I think you're right. Yeah, I mean, I'm so old school with this. This is the most advanced thing in my toolbox. So you know, and I do think like that, like a lot of other companies use a lot of techniques. To be honest, like I don't like a lot of the Urushi finishes on a lot of like kind of mainstream pens because I think they're very kind of plasticky, and they're just like they're too perfect, and I don't like it. I mean, and I'm not digging on anybody who likes that sort of thing. I just personally just think that I much prefer something handmade, something from a person. Usually when like if you ever go out to Japan, there are a few famous pen shops. I've been to a couple. I went to Eboya. I love Eboya. But even then, like you go to Eboya, right? And you know, because like I talk Japanese, you know, I speak it quite well, and you know, they gave me a tour of the factory and everything, and they took me to the old workshop, right? And they had two beautiful Japanese old school lathes. I cannot emphasize how like beautiful these lathes are. I admire the old pen makers so much. They had this awful piece of equipment. It was this awful kind of like it's pedal powered, these lathes. They're pedal powered. They used to make their own collets and they used to make their own tools for threading. And I went there, I looked at these old school lathes, I had a little go, I did a bit of threading, I had the best day of my life. And I'm like, oh, aren't you using these anymore? And they're like, no, we've got a CNC one downstairs. And I'm just like, ah. So, you know, I don't think there are like many people or companies out there like hand turn ebonite anymore. And I think they're like a lot of like the very best of the best pens. Yes, there is some sort of industrialization involved in it. And I have like done a lot of reading around kind of like, because Urushi is purposed for some industrial purposes. You know, you'll find it in like a lot of kind of like production, particularly not sound too macabre around like funeral items. Because Urushi is quite heavily used on kind of like in the Japanese home, they have like a kind of internal grave. You know, where they kind of keep the ashes and they keep a special book with like all the names of like the ancestors in it. And that uses quite a lot of heavy Urushi and heavy application. And you'll find like industrialized Urushi in quite unusual places you wouldn't think of, if that makes sense. But yeah, but what I really loved about Japan, like Urushi shops like aren't really that mainstream, you know, not as mainstream as Urushi products. In that sense, I used to go to like these lovely little shops, and they bring out all these lovely little things like handmade by people, which are just really special. You've actually got to ask, you know, this is Japan, right? So a proper Japanese store, like you go in and there's like a raised tatami surface and there's a counter, and you speak to people. There's no sense of browsing or going, oh, this thing looks nice. You got to sit there, you got to talk. I've got to be like, hi, I'm Ruth. You know, I'm really interested in like Urushi pens, and they'll go, okay, and they'll go away for 10 minutes, rummage through whatever, then come out with like a kind of like really, really beautiful tray of like all these unusual things. And that's kind of how it works, and like the real kind of old school way. So like it's very different. If you think you're going to browse around Japan and find something unique, it doesn't work like that. You got to ask. It's weird, isn't it?
I think there's a video on YouTube which has got something like 1.5 million viewers of the Fountain Pen Hospital in Japan, and I can't remember precisely where it is, but it's about this guy who just goes into the shop and then he's greeted by this quite elderly gentleman. They have this conversation, and yeah, you highlight that absolutely perfectly, because he starts talking about the writing styles, the characteristics, and then he just doubles off under the counter and brings out a selection of pens and then puts them down. I just thought, that is just something completely unique. And we now live in a day and age where, certainly in the UK, the moment you go into a shop and someone asks you a question, we feel bothered by it, but it's completely different in Japan, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Completely different.
Yeah, it's very important to like kind of build up a kind of rapport with it. I think I'm the same with my customers, to be honest, because like the product I make is, you know what I mean? It's not a factory assembled product. It's handmade. Things go wrong, and I think we froze for a minute there.
You're back. Okay, we've got you
back.
We've got you back here. Okay.
There was an irony to that when you said things go wrong, and then
things go wrong.
While we've got the breakdown, I'm conscious Lucy's asked, how did you get into Urushi techniques? What drew you into it in the first place?
I'm just kind of like in school, because like obviously living out there for a long time, I went to a Japanese school, and you kind of like go on field trips and stuff to these kinds of places, and I just kind of like picked it up, and it's the sort of thing you like study, is like kind of like like art evening class type things that you get here, or you kind of like do little kind of day course type things. There's no formal education in it. There's no like degrees or classifications in it, and there probably is like trade schools for it, but I'm not entirely sure. That's something I have to look up. And it just kind of like took off from there, really. It takes a long time. I think like some techniques are like really in your head kind of thing. Urushi is like all about kind of like feel and touch and stuff. Even though like I showed you stuff out of tubes, I still kind of do my own mixings after they're out the tube to make sense. I've got my own kind of recipes that they're my secret guarded recipes, and I wouldn't share them with anybody, and I've got to adjust them based on the season as well, but like they're not even measured. It's here, like it's what I see, it's what I feel, it's what I know is right. And I know that's so weird.
No, it's art rather than science, and I think that's the rather lovely thing about this, as I say. So when you're building up a pen and building up the layers, is it a highly planned process in the sense that you know what you're doing for every layer, months ahead of time, or is it very much, because you said it's by feel and by art? I presume it's more that you see what each layer has done and then work out what you'll do and almost solve it a layer at a time, is it? Or
I wish, like I think I know what I'm doing up until the last 10 layers. Then it's anything goes.
And why the last 10?
Because the first like 40 or so I can cover up any mistakes. After that you can see everything. and like I say, things don't always go to plan. And to be honest, sometimes things not going to plan has been some of my best work. And I can't always replicate my designs as well. So like that's why like stuff I tend to release tends to be like seasonal, special, limited edition, or it might just be available for certain months of the year, because I just know I can't replicate it. Like we're in winter now. Winter is Taminuri season. So here's a question: how many layers do you typically do? About 50. And how it breaks down. So like you have the ebonite itself. It's rough sanded. I use about 10 layers of sealant, and that's raw urushi, and that just kind of like gets it ready for urushi to be applied. that I use about kind of like 20 layers of what's called middle layer, and that just kind of like fleshes out the pen. And the last 10 to 20 layers are all decoration and polishing layers. And those are the unpredictable parts, really. But, you know, if like somebody orders a pen, I'll just be like, hey, like it didn't quite work out. This is how it goes. I can sand it back to the middle layers and we can start again. Or you can be like, hey, that looks great. We'll go with that. So like I always find like it's best to keep like a really kind of open channel with people. You know, if people buy a pen from me, it's going to take a long time. End of story. You know, I think the longest one's waited for a pen for me is like been a year, just because it went very wrong and I had to fix it. And kind of like I usually send an update every week, see how it's going, see how it's progressing, and even at some point, like the buyer might be like, you know, oh, that thing that went wrong that actually looks great. Can you replicate it? And I'll go, yeah. It's really kind of like organic, really.
Do you only work on ebonite pens, or is it plastic pens as well, or plastic or resin?
I only work on ebonite pens. You can put Urushi on plastic, but to me, this is a whole different field that I have a very poor awareness of, because it works really well on some plastics and really well on others. When I did my training on like the kind of the West Coast, the guy there, his job, he had these red plastic bowls, and he was putting the amber Urushi on them to make like a tamanuri finish. And because they were like bowls that were like heavily used every day, that they needed redoing every year, and he told me the plastic name, and it's poof gone. I'll have to go there next time and write it down. It doesn't work on all plastics, but it will work on a lot of plastics. But yeah, I also use wood. So people are asking so many questions, and like I can't even say them properly. I'm sorry. I need to work out how the questions work. What have I done?
Do you want me to try and shout them out? Does that help a bit?
If you wouldn't mind, just so I could like see like the screen and the questions.
Yeah, no worries at all. So Noah asks, can you build up Urushi to create 3D shapes?
Yes, you can. It's you mix Urushi with charcoal to create a kind of paste, and you use it to build up shapes or build up lots of layers and carve out shapes. The technique's called kamakura.
And how does that compare to things like obviously the obvious thing when you think about a shaped pen, certainly to my mind anyway, is things like the Nakaya dorsal fin with that amazing kind of triangular curved shape to it. So is that something that you build up a layer at a time, or would that be with the charcoal, or you know?
I'm really not sure how they do that. I actually think that they do it layer at a time, to be honest.
Okay.
That's my impression from having like studied and read their work. But like I say, that the Urushi makers, they're not going to tell me.
How do you handle the pen so that you don't get marks during the application or curing? That was Ross was kind of curious about that. You know, how do you grip it or hold it?
It's going to get marks on it. Just polish it. But that's what marks, because it's like finger oil, isn't it? Because like Urushi pens like oil, it polishes them, it makes it yours, it makes it unique. So you know, you want to be using it, you want to be handling it, you're polishing it. And if you're bothered because you want to show it off and be like, oh, this is a nice pen, just get like, you know, like those microfiber classes for you know what you use for your glasses. To just use one of them and just give it a rub and it'll come right off.
Awesome, thank you. And then we've got another follow-up question. Andrew, I think we all know he's super excited. So Andrew is really exploring Urushi himself at the moment, so he's loving this talk. I'm sure we'll have more questions as well. Noah asks, how hard is Urushi? So how easy is it to scratch or crack if it's done properly? On
the Mohs scale, it has a hardness of 5. And so that basically means it's fingernail resistant, so it's not really that hard. Baked Urushi can have a hardness of up to 50, believe it or not, depending on the process of how it's cured, but there are a lot of factors in the final hardness.
And what are the pros and cons of baked versus naturally curing? Because obviously you offer pens with both types at different times, haven't you, so far?
I do. Pros and not so much pros and cons, like different applications. Bake's gonna go on metal because you can't really bake wood or urushi, you're just gonna melt it. Bake can be done a lot quicker, so it has a lot higher turnaround. Baked is a lot harder, but also baked has a limited number of techniques, and you can't use as many kind of like mixtures with it either. Especially like because some of my work uses egg and tofu, I can't use that on baked. You just end up with an eggy pen, a scrambled egg urushi pen. So on the other side, when you're air curing, it takes longer. You need more layers. You need more techniques. You can use a lot more techniques on it. So I wouldn't say there's pros or cons over the other. It just like it depends on what you actually want to achieve with it. If that makes sense.
I can certainly testify to the hardness of baked urushi. The Miki, they bake their pens because of the mass manufacturing aspect of it.
Yeah.
I had a heart in the mouth moment because, well, no one wants to drop their urushi pen, but I dropped mine on the conservatory stone floor, and there was not a single dent on it, not a single dent. So yeah, I can really testify to the hardness of it. It kind of surprises me how and why they actually say don't actually post the cap on an urushi product, because it is a pretty hard product. But I guess because the artisans are so sort of precious about their work, they don't really want to run the risk of any defects happening. I mean, have you got anything which you can add to that?
Yeah, like if it's air cured, you are going to scratch it with the threads. End of story. I design all my stuff not to be posted unless I put like threads on the end of it. Maybe that's the kind of urushi pen maker within me speaking, but I hate posting caps. I hate it so much.
Well, that makes me think, if I may, is possibly because they probably make urushi in all ranges of hardness, and they have a kind of a one catch-all warning for everyone. So if you buy an urushi that is air cured, it's going to scratch. If you buy it baked, it's going to be harder. But they send a warning to everyone anyway. So that could be why they say don't post it, even though it's baked.
Even though like you got like threads on it, like grit and nasty things can get in threads, and then you're scraping that all over your lovely pen. So I think it's just not worth the tears. You know, I'd rather not take the risk.
Can I ask something about regions?
Of course, yes.
Yeah, back to what you said about Osaka having their own style, other regions having their own style of applications. I'm actually curious to know, other than fountain pens, are there any typical objects that relate to regions that you expect to see in urushi? Let's say if you go to Japan, to a particular region, and say you go to a shop, do they specialize in particular accessories?
Yes, a lot of regions have their own kind of like style of it's called shoki in Japanese, which is like you kind of like your dinnerware and stuff. So like there's one region which like it was like an old war site, and they did like these really big thick bowls with these big thick bases, and like they slathered on this dark brown urushi, and like it's kind of like this really kind of rustic kind of style. And in the north, where I trained, they do these lovely little apple boxes because apples are famous there. You can decorate them with the urushi, and so yeah, every little. Of course, you're gonna have like your generic kind of cups, bowls, blah blah blah. And another place I studied, Nico. I might have broke this cup. 2 seconds. I might have broke this cup. I have a few items. Sorry, should have really got these ready. So this is Nikko style. Nikko's like north of Tokyo. It's a special kind of region. These are up in the mountains. So this is kind of like a matte style, and then they use the lathe to put in like these kind of like randomized grooves. And this is Nikko. I've got another one. Hang on.
That's gorgeous. That is absolutely gorgeous.
What is that actually on?
This is from my teacher.
What is the base of it?
Oh, I'm really sorry, you're breaking up.
I think
Can-
she was. What's the base of the actual object?
This is wood. This is just a nice cup. I used to have a black one, but I broke that. And this is from where I trained, and kind of like the West Coast. The names really escape me. I'm being a bit today. I'm thinking of is Phoenix. I think it's named after Phoenix. Hang on, I'm going to be 2 seconds. I'm just going to Google it on my phone where I went. Built a map of Japan. You know, when it's like, I know how to get there, but I don't know what it's called. I'm having one of those moments. Right, map of Japan.
I believe pretty much 99% of Urushi objects in Japan are made from wood as a substrate. Is that correct?
I wouldn't know the exact statistic, but I would think that yes, the vast majority are either wood or paper mache. You don't actually get a lot of like ebonite fountain pens, believe it or not. Oh, I really am stupid. The word I wanted was fukui, which is where fuku urushi is from. Aha! All I had to do was add an I. But this is a fukui style. So if you look on the inside, you see this kind of like lines, because this is a lathe assisted applying technique, where they like it's rolling around on the lathe, and they kind of use the brush to apply the urushi on the inside as it's rolling, so you can see the lines there. And the outside is a tamanuri technique, where they've kind of like they've sanded this by hand, painted the urushi on it, and then sanded it again to get this kind of technique. I think we look really mint on a pen, to be honest. That's why I bought it, because I'm like, I'm going to copy this. So
Now, this is used actually for eating or drinking.
Yeah.
Relating to a question by Darren asking about how poisonous urushi can be. If it breaks or cracks, does the D players bring out any of their poisonous qualities?
No, not really. Urushi's like it's only really poisonous in its raw form. When it's inert, it's completely non-toxic, and if it cracks, which it shouldn't do, it's very bad if urushi cracks. It's usually the kind of like it's still quite inert, although to be honest, like it takes about a year to fully cure.
Okay.
As well, so yeah. Okay, any more questions there?
It's not so much of a question, but an observation. It's just when I'm nowhere near an expert on urushi, but what I find quite amazing is that wars have happened over the preciousness of urushi and how guarded techniques are in Japan. To the fact people have killed over trees, I just find that incredible, absolutely incredible.
Pretty much, but it's really useful stuff. It has a lot of religious significance too. I think in the old days it was like used as like a kind of glue, decorative. It used to be like used a lot in construction, because like they figured out you could paint it on wood and then like the insects wouldn't eat it. So it's always had like a really important significance in Japan's history. I mean, I think these days most of it's used as more kind of like decorational, but that doesn't mean that like it's never like not being useful, because it is a very useful thing. Just now there's better things around than urushi.
Ruth, I guess one thing that would be useful for people that maybe are thinking about an urushi pen, they can obviously talk to you individually about your particular process for ordering and creating pens, but what about caring for urushi pens? Are there any special tips, advice, things you should avoid, what things you would or wouldn't do with an urushi pen?
Yeah, urushi hates light, UV light. It degrades, so does ebonite. Anything alcohol based will absolutely strip it. So you got to be careful, even like like when you're washing your hands like that rotten alcohol stuff. Then you go to handle your urushi pen, you've ruined it. And so yeah, store it in a dark, cool place. That's why it usually comes with their own boxes, because they really should be kept in a box when you're not using them, or like when you're carrying them out, put them in a pen kimono. Don't use any strong polishing agents. Your fingers and a little bit of oil are enough. And if you do that, then like, you know, it'll last a long time. At some point, depending on the style, it might need a redo of the top layer. That's perfectly normal as well. In that case, you get back in touch with a pen manufacturer and they'll usually sort that out. And personally, I don't charge for redos or top-ups of top layers, because like there's very much an understanding for me that when you buy a pen from me, you kind of buy, you know, the ongoing service maintenance of Urushi as well, if that makes sense. But of course, different stores have different policies, but most Urushi artists think along those lines that, you know, if you come and it needs a new top coat, you'll get a new top coat.
You and Andrew mentioned earlier that that the majority of Urushi coated items in Japan are made from wood, and I wonder why. What draws you towards ebonite rather than maybe making wooden pens? Obviously, you've got some wood pens, but are there major differences in how those materials handle the layers, or is it just to do with the overall feel of the object, or is there sort of a specific driver, I guess?
Yeah, well, I love working with wood. Wood and Urushi, they're so unpredictable, and together with a little bit of a nightmare. Yeah, like for example, like I turned this pen, right? It's beautiful. Over time, it's warped itself a little bit and decentered itself from the lid. And I'm like, oh, how could you do that to me?
Oh, man, humidity in wood, it's a nightmare, isn't it?
It is. That's a big problem with wood. Ebonite's fairly stable if you keep it out of UV light. Wood's not. It warps and changes and ages. And Urushi doesn't prevent that process, but rather like it adds to that process. But if you want like a beautiful flush wooden pen with Urushi on it, oh my goodness, I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen.
I know Edmund had his hand up briefly, but before Edmund gets his question, Andrew, it sort of ties into the same stuff actually. But Andrew says, you know, if you're someone who's sensitized to poison ivy or poison oak, so you're aware that those are obviously plants in the UK that if you touch them, you can get sensitivity. Would that then make you sensitive to Urushi? And as far as you know, would that be a problem?
It does, yeah. Actually, like advise people if you've ever had a reaction to poison oak or ivy to refrain from buying an Urushi pen. Now, what I do for people who get interested and contact me is I send them out a little cured sample to interact with. And if they have a reaction, I say, just don't. Not a part opinion. It's just a pen. It's not worth going to hospital for IV antihistamines for. Get another one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just not worth it.
Yeah, I had a bit of itching on my eyes when I borrowed the Urushi pen from Fountain Pen. So I thought, nope, can't.
Yeah, like there's loads of other materials and decorations. Some people can like replicate the look of Urushi using resin. You know, it's your health. Anaphylaxis is not nice. And you know, that's what I advise. Like I'm more than happy to send people out little test samples to have a go with before like they commit to buying a pen. But like at the same time, like I don't advise people, because like Urushi is one of these really funny things that like if you've had a previous reaction, you'll use it without problems for years, and then suddenly, bang! I've had it happen to me twice. And you know, I'm not always the best at like following protocol and procedure, and I'm just like whatever, and like I'm covered in it at the end of the day. But I've had two, and they just happened very quickly, and the rashes are incredibly painful, but they can also like spread into your lungs as well via the fumes. So it's really not a nice reaction. Get an ebonite pen instead.
Yeah, yeah. You know,
And get it from
thanks.
Eboya. They're the best.
Oh,
ebonite thing.
I love
Eboya,
Eboya.
really.
Yeah, I only use Eboya ebonite, to be honest. I do occasionally use some if they're really something pretty, but yes, I love Eboya ebonite. Like, they do gorgeous pens. I love the shop. They're so nice.
Edmund, did you have a question as well, or was that a legacy hand?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment on the caring for Urushi pens. If you go onto the Izod site, they've got a Nakaya for sale, and the person clearly didn't know and had it in a display case with sunlight blaring onto it, and you can see there's the whole sort of half the pen is completely matte from where the sun's damaged it, and then there's one layer of shiny, one sort of stripe of shiny clearly where some lead has been, and then there's a thicker layer of completely matte, and then the rest of the pen, kind of maybe 1/3 of it, is actually in good condition. It's
Oh,
it's
nasty.
heartbreaking, but it's a great illustration to show what sun damage can do to it. And yeah, this was on the Izod site last week. I sort of saw the price and I thought, oh, here's my chance to get a Nakaya. But as soon as I actually opened the picture up, it's like, definitely not.
All you can do then is strip it, to be honest, at that point. Just sand it off, strip it, start over.
Yeah.
But then again, like, if it's been really bad exposed to sunlight, I'd better think what the ebonite's like underneath as well. So it's a bit like, ooh.
Yeah,
I know we all love bargains. I love bargains. But yeah. Any more questions there?
Well, just one question. What you talked about Makie before,
Yeah.
and you studied for it. What was your sort of reservations to actually sort of continuing that sort of journey?
I still continue Makie, but I'm not good enough to release it on a pen yet.
Is that because of the actual challenges of on a cylindrical surface?
Yes, Makie is very, very difficult on any surface, to be fair. Watch this space, like I say, because I haven't been able to train properly for 2 years either. So I would like to start releasing kind of more kind of Makie designs, but I need more training, to be quite frank.
I mean, from my experience of painting on pens, I think the sort of challenges that I certainly faced were the sort of the stiffness of the brush and actually keeping control of the actual pressure as you're going around the actual cylindrical surface. That's what I sort of fell into the difficulties of. But when you see these Makie artists doing demonstrations, whether it's on YouTube or in person, the control and the level of detail they go to, it's just absolutely mind-blowing. And I know when people look at these pens like from Namiki, which cost several £1,000s, I still think they're very cheap, considering, you know, the amount of years of practice which they've actually sunk into actually obtaining, you know, like the sort of national treasure status of Japan.
Yeah, exactly. Like I know, like, a couple of £1,000 is like a lot to spend on a pen, and you know, I'm certainly like not in that position in my life where I can drop several thousands on a pen. Who knows? Just got to marry someone rich. You know, no ring, guys. But you know, you get what you pay for, and what you say Nakaya do, only Nakaya can do, and that's what you pay for. You know, what I do, only I can do, and that's what you pay for. You know, it's you know, you could easily spend that money on something mass produced. I'm sure Mount Blanc or whoever will find ways to bring out a pen that expensive, you know, fancy gold and a bit bling, you know, for people like that sort of thing. But yeah. And you got to remember, you do get something unique. I mean, I admire quite a lot of Urushi artists. Nakaya is someone I follow, and I just look and I'm just thinking, oh my goodness. And someone could sit and tell me, make that Nakaya, and I could do it. I will use exactly the same ebonite, exactly the same Urushi. I will hack into their brains and find out the curing times, the thickness application. I will do all this, and I will yield a completely different result. And that's the nature of the beast, really. So if I think if you see like a pen from someone from like a Urushi artist, and it's really unique and it's several £1000s, and you think, I want it, you know, it's something to save up for. Don't go looking for something like a cheaper alternative, you know, especially if you see it and like it speaks to you. Go for it. Sell a kidney. You only need one.
I really second that. I mean, I've got a minimal sort of collection of Urushi based pens,
Nice.
and I've got a little bit of Makie from Nakaya and a little bit of Makie from Namiki, and both are absolutely beautiful, but both deploy completely different techniques. I was also very fortunate to meet one of the artists who worked for Namiki for some time. And she's just recently left to set up her own shop. And interestingly, right up to even the Yukari lineup, they're still utilizing quite a lot of etching technology onto their pens and screen print. And then it's just what you're paying for is just some of the actual hand finishing techniques. Pens. When you start seeing those signatures on those pens, that's when you're paying either a lot of money, but you're complete products. And I think that's what actually sort of what appealed to me with Nakaya is that everything is literally hand done, you know, right from like the Mooncat, which is quite affordable at $1,000, going up to, you know, like the $30,000, $40,000 pens. And it's just absolutely mind-boggling, the actual attention to detail which they're actually paying to the techniques. It's mesmerizing. Works of art.
Yeah, I agree that they just like release like really gorgeous stuff, which like I say, even like I've probably got 10 years experience with Urushi and I can't replicate it. And I think that's like the good mark of an artist, is that you sit there and think, how could I do this? And if you can't work it out, I'm like, that's good stuff. That is, that's how I see it. Right? Any more questions? If not, I'll do a little demo for everybody.
I think let's go for the demo.
Yeah. So my demonstration, I'm going to show everybody using my special Urushi brush. So it actually says on it, Urushi brush number 10. So this kind of like, it's like a bristle brush, and how it works is you use it, and because Urushi sticks to everything, especially things you don't want it to, when you're done, you kind of like, you snip it off till it goes all the way down. And that's how this brush works. Right, need gloves. So I'm going to show you how to like correctly apply layers of Urushi to a pen surface. There's a special technique that it's done, and the aim is to make this process as you want to get everything even. And if you put it on too thick, it's going to form all these horrible little wrinkles, and you have to sand it over and start again, because it's just basically rubbish, and it's going to make an absolutely rubbish pen in the process. So this is like a barrel of an Urushi pen. Don't drop things. Always dropping things. And I'm going to show, we're going to put on a layer of black, basically. So how I work, I like to work off my gloves, which is actually really bad practice, and my teacher goes mental at us for it. Because everything should be like in proper dishes and mixed with spatulas, and this stuff is being removed out of the tube and pre-filtered, because there is like a filtering process using a special paper. So basically you pour it into the paper and filter it out, rather than do it every time. I tend to do the whole tube. Also naughty, but like if I wasn't demonstrating, I probably, like when I'm getting to the top layers, I start to filter it rather than just use it directly out the tube. So that like helps get rid of a lot of dust, because you don't want dust at the top layers. You just cry at this point. So usually you'd flatten this out with a spatula, I'm doing naughty Urushi practice right now. Right, so basically like the trick to applying it is you've got to like put it on in lots of different directions. So you start with like the kind of like horizontal strokes like this. You see, I'm just putting it horizontally up the pen. As it goes, I'm just going to keep on applying it, slowly turning it around. So after you've gone lengthways, the next stage is to go this way. But you are ultimately kind of like dealing with a round surface. So once you've put it on this way, it's got to rotate it. And then just keep on going all the way around. And then after that bit, you've got to go diagonally to remove the excess urushi. So you start going this way and folding your way down the pen. When you reach the bottom, you give a scrape on your gloves. And you keep going like this until you're happy that you've got the thickness that you want. Now, I'm using a black urushi, and that means if I cock up, no one's going to be ever able to tell. But if I use a translucent urushi, any mistake I made will be found out within a year. So, because everything gets lighter, and you'll not see it on the first cure when it first dries, but yeah, it's going to show up. I can remember like when I first studied it, I was doing bowls. Bowls are the hardest thing to paint because you got, you know, the outside concave bit and the inside bit, and that's what we do. We'd paint them, put them in the cupboard for a year, and afterwards my teacher would bring them out and he'd go, "What is this? Look at that! Look at that!" Ah, and tell me off because like it was just a complete mess. That's why it takes so long to study, because sometimes you gotta wait so long to see what it actually looks like. I mean, right now I've got 4 bowls sitting there in Japan waiting for me to inspect them, see how I did last time I was out there. so yeah, I'll send the basic technique. So like I've got so many brushes. I've got about 1,000 brushes, all with like different purposes. Don't even want to start on my brushes, and then there's chisels as well for like carving different designs. I've probably like got like a ridiculous amount of tools in a massive toolbox. And so yeah, that's the basics. There's also like lathe applied techniques. I don't know if anybody saw did you see my campaign where I had like the red and the black and they all kind of merged together? And that's a lathe applied technique. And then, you know, you've got your spatulas, your chisels. So yeah, I'll go through a few of the things that I've done and call it a day. So this pen here is Nanako Nuri. This is done with rape seeds. So basically, you slather the pen in a very thick layer of urushi. I roll it in a very high-tech Japanese thing called cling film, and I leave it alone for a week. And then I prop it up, let the seeds fall off naturally, and then you get like these kind of like little kind of like fish egg things. This pen was relatively successful, but see, botched it there, and I botched it somewhere else. Yes, so I botched it in a few places. So it's not quite perfect yet, but one day I will master Nanako. That is my aim. I think I already showed you this one. So this is kawari. So kawari is basically you have black, you have a disruptor agent, which in this case was egg white. Then you put gold on top of that. Then you put amber on top of that. Then you sand it down, and the final result is your pen. That's kawari. I did the same with this pen here. I love this bit here. This is technically over sanding, but I absolutely love it. Don't ask me why.
And Ruth, on these pens, on these particular finishes, are they tactile or are they smooth on the surface? It's quite hard to tell on camera whether they're sort of slightly tactile finishes or if they're purely smooth, almost lacquered finishes.
These are all smooth, especially when you've used egg whites. If you leave it rough, it's just going to end like an eggy pen that's going to flake off. So these are all smooth. The only like tactile finish I do is the sabi finish. But I could work on more like tactile finishes if like I do more kind of like solid mixes with charcoal.
Okay, noted. No, I just think it's amazing because you look at them and you kind of get the sense that they should be kind of like quite tactile.
Yeah.
One of the things I love about these Urushi pens is that ability to create that. I mean, that beautiful kind of almost underwater look, as if you're looking at the bottom of a lake or the bottom of a pond or something. You know what I mean? I think it's really cool.
It's kind of what I go for, and I prefer. So the problem with tactile finishes is that they're really easy to cock up. That's why you pay quite a lot of money for them. Because you introduce like an agent and you don't sand it down. And that means if there's any kind of nasty bit of air or like a bad bit of cure, it's going to break off. Sure, that's why they're quite expensive. They're quite tricky.
Amazing. Show us more. Show us more. I think people are really keen to see this.
Yes. So
there's also, I mean, a real question here. Obviously, we all know that a lot of these kind of Japanese Urushi pens, are in the hundreds or the high hundreds or thousands or even tens of thousands. I think it'd be helpful for people to understand the sort of roughly the scale of costs for a pen that you might make for the UK market.
I tend to charge about like £300 for them, depending on what you want, like 200 to 300. Some are as low as 150. It just depends on what you kind of like want and how much work I need to put into it, really. I'm quite flexible as well. So like if people want one, just get in touch. Like I'm perfectly happy just for people just to like talk pen with me. You know what I mean? You don't have to talk to me to put an order.
I totally agree. And obviously I've got an order with you that we're working gradually building on. It's one of the things I've loved is our kind of occasional chats about what about this and what about that, and it's been a great fun process. I mean, I think I even started my conversation with saying it was really funny because you go to Nakaya and you have their kind of their God knows how many step handwriting survey and the going through the website and the emails back and forth.
Yeah.
Frankly, it's a pain in the arse and not particularly enjoyable. It's curious, but actually dealing with you has been an absolute delight, and I think the pens that will come out will be much more interesting and much more beautiful in a way, to be honest with you.
Well, ultimately it's your pen, you do get involved with it, you get a bit design element in it. If someone comes to me and they're like, what'd be really, 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 really cool if we did this insert weird idea here, and you know what, I'll say, do you know what? It might not work, but I'll try it. I'll do a little tester, and if it works out well, yeah, we could end up with a big, horrible, globby mess. But nothing ventured, nothing gained, right?
Absolutely. I mean, actually, on that note, Roz has just come straight in on a question here saying, "Can you add small roll stops by making up some paste and then applying it to the cap?"
Sorry.
We've got one question from the group from Roz Howe saying, is it possible to make roll stops for the pens, perhaps by making up the paste and then applying it to the cap or applying a bead of it to the cap, that kind of a thing?
Yeah, you can do it with charcoal, but it's going to take about 6 months to do that.
There you go. Roz, there you go. Now you know. I think my pen's probably going to be 6 months anyway, but that is totally not a problem.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, because you ordered blue ones. So basically, if you order from me like anything in blue, you're going to wait. Because blue is just really, really, really hard to cure in this climate, because it has to be applied like much more thicker than the other layers. So what cures well in this climate? Red and black are absolutely fantastic. After that, blue is purple is impossible, and I don't even want to talk about yellow anymore. Purple. I can only do purple in an oven. I've tried to cure a purple pen for over 2 years. I've given up. I don't know.
Sounds like you need maybe a dehumidifier box or something for a purple one. I don't know, but
just get a metal pen.
Just get a metal pen, stick it in the oven. Purple legs 130. So you give me up on my secrets. Where purple 130 for 3 hours. I couldn't believe it. I was tearing my hair out. Oh. What on earth takes 3 hours in an oven? You know what I mean?
Well, the results are much loved.
Don't cook my dinner that long. But yeah, so next one, oops, dropping things. So this one is Negoro. So basically this is you have like lots and lots of like black and yellow layers, irregular, sand it down, get the kind of like antique effect, and I kind of put gold leaf over it. I'm sorry, I've never, ever been able to replicate results with gold leaf. It was a very warm, hot summer. I've since abandoned attempts. And this is actually a yellow nanako. It's really hard to see. Somehow in my Genius, I put yellow on yellow. And there's a contrast there. Don't ask me how I did that. It was meant to be black. And this was one release. So this one was Autumn Skies. So this is your carrot technique. Basically, it's blue, spatula with red, silver on top, blue on top, sand down polish, and that's the final result of that. Sabi finishes with the sponge. These were done in an oven. So this is like copper, brass, aluminum, red, black, amber, sponge it, oven it, and that's those ones.
Were those kind of like the ones you did for your Kickstarters? They look sort of reminiscent of the Kickstarter ones you did, maybe.
Yeah, those are the same ones. Yeah, but I know people don't like ballpoints here, so I'm trying not to focus too much on the ballpoints. Like when I first joined it said devil sticks. I'm like, oh, they mean e-cigarettes. Oh, thankfully I didn't post any ballpoints. I would have made a couple of enemies, you know. But I honestly thought that's what they meant, e-cigarette, because when I like turn was like, I mean, I don't smoke. It's a terrible habit. It's
a terrible colloquialism of us to call them devil sticks. I mean, you know, I think in the end these trick techniques are beautiful on any pen, really, but we'd rather they were fountain pens for sure.
That's fair enough, and I'm more than happy to respect that. But I do make ballpoints as well, and this one's just black. This is one of like my really early works, and I'm so clever. I Urushi'd the nib into it and it stuck forever. So yeah. Does anyone want a cheap pen? You're never getting the nib out. And yeah, and then this was like this one's a bit of a weird one. So basically this is like a revival of like an old vintage design. So how it works, right, is that kind of like you have your nib in here, right, and it kind of screws back in. And when you're done with it, you kind of like unscrew it, and then it screws back into the unit, kind of thing. It's actually an old design from the 1920s I was playing with. This has got black urushi on it with like a bit of silver powder, and then I did one in red as well. I might release that.
Is that an eyedropper?
No. You can use my pens as eyedroppers if they're ebonite, believe it or not.
So like those ones, how do you? I mean, I think Evan spotted the same thing. How do you? So you flip the section and nib around and pop it back in to keep it safe. How do you get ink to the nib though? Is it just with a cartridge converter, or
you can use any converter or just pour it straight in?
Okay, fine. So maybe you'd eyedropper that one and then just be very careful when you.
Yeah, like you can eyedropper any like ebonite pen, but like if you're gonna like shake it around and jump out, well, yeah, of course it's gonna leak. You know what I mean? If you use an eyedropper like a fountain pen, like an ebonite fountain pen as an eyedropper, it's a desk pen. It's not a take to work in your pocket pen. You know what I mean? And
the ebonite will cope okay with a little tiny bit of silicone grease on the threads then.
Oh, of course, but like if you use it an eyedropper and I'm like, and you know, you went on like your Harley or jumped out of an airplane and said it leaked everywhere, I'll be like, well, you know what I mean? So
Jim, you can't take it to work, basically.
That depends on what you do. If you're a fireman.
Yeah, I quite fancy a Shibui North and on my helicopters and speed. I think that'd be really good.
Not an eyedropper.
Probably don't eyedropper it and take it on a helicopter. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, how did I lose my job? Yeah.
Certainly not with red ink, Jim.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Put Bay State Blue in it, basically.
Never, that stuff is deadly. I mean, you think Urushi's poisonous, Bay State Blue is just awful.
Sorry, I was going to ask, do you have a favorite? What's your favorite kind of technique or finish or color? Is there something that really speaks to you when you're making your pens? Is there one that's kind of, this is your thing, you know, you feel
my favorite thing is like kara, because like you never quite know what you're going to get at the end.
And which one was?
Can you show us the kara again? Just with
kara is this one with the spatula.
Brilliant.
I just love this because like, especially when I do it in the oven, right? Because one of the fun things about the oven is that like different Urushis have like different thicknesses. So like if it's quite thin, it's going to like form all these streaks and shapes, or if it's quite thick, it's going to take on a lot more texture. Then when you combine it with the kara finish, you really do get something quite different each time. especially when like I'm messing around with the temperatures and stuff. In some ways, I quite like doing the oven baked pens because I can like do what would normally take months in like hours, kind of thing. So it's how I prototype a lot of things for the ebonite. To be fair as well, I have these little like aluminum discs, and I prototype everything on them in the oven before they go onto the ebonite. But yeah, I just love it because like you know, especially when like I'm using like a lot of tofu, for example, as weird as that is. And I just kind of like cake this pen and paste, and you know, you got something like this, and then you do a year's worth of carrot, so like it's like this, and you sand it all off, and you just get something totally different. I just love doing that.
Just a quick question: if you were to sort of revisit or hone your skills to a point where you're happy of doing maquillage on a fountain pen, would you use the oven baking technique with your black layers to start with before doing your maquillage, or would you prefer still doing it on a wood or ebonite pen?
Or if I do maquillage, it's going to be on ebonite. I wouldn't do if you're going to put metal on a metal pen, there's a lot more obvious techniques to that, I would think. You know, like I probably like use some sort of plating technique for metal. But I don't know. I definitely want to like start off on ebonite. I don't think it would be very easy to like replicate that on metal at all, because metal's really heavy, right? So actually, when like you're painting on metal, because like, you know, I have special dowels that hold the pen when I'm working on it. So you know, I've got the pen in its dowel and painting on it very gently, and I don't know, it's really tricky with metal, just because of the weight. Maybe I'm just a wuss with weak arms. I don't know, but yeah, it's tricky. I have like played a little bit, because like one thing I'd love to do with like a metal pen, which I'm working on, is like have it like engrave it, put Urushi in the groove marks, and bake it and see how that turns out.
So sort of like a chinking effect almost, but
in reverse, kind of.
The actual millions of layers, then destroying your pen by accident with one misstroke of the chisel.
Oh, that'd be fun. That'll be lots of tears and sadness.
Yeah, I've got a real admiration to anyone who can do chinking to any degree, because yeah, it's just shuddered at the thought of actually making a mistake after months and months of work of building up those substrates and then getting those black layers on, and then one chisel gone.
I love to develop Kamakura techniques more, but that's about a year's work.
So you're hoping to go back to Japan and carry on with some development work with your techniques? Yeah,
definitely. I definitely want to go out there. I definitely want to study more. Like there's just so much to learn. I think in the future I'd love to like release a book, just like showing everything I've traveled, everything I've seen. There is like an Institute of Urushi in Japan, which, like, you know, it's like a list which tells you where to go, where things are. Once again, if you don't read Japanese, you're not going to understand it. They don't put these things in English. My parents are like missionaries. I'm like a Christian army brat, basically. That's how I ended up there.
Amazing. Guys, if there aren't too many more questions, what I think I'm going to do, I'm going to draw the winner for the Izod's pen. The Izod's pen, it's a lovely pen. It feels like it's going to pale in significance because anything you could make, but the Izod's pen, the Izod's paradigm is a beautiful thing. So we did a draw for the winner while you were chatting, and so I use a random number generator on my phone and then just compare it to the list of people in the chat so you're aware of it. So the winner of the Izod's paradigm, I'll show you what that looks like just so that those of you that don't know it will hopefully see it. Hopefully you can now see that on my that's on my screen. Is that coming up to your screen now? Yeah. So I reviewed this on my website a while back. This is the Izod's paradigm here. This is the one. It's the launch edition number 8 in blue ebonite or teal ebonite. It's a piston film made by Mayora on behalf of Izod's. So that's the prize tonight, and the winner of that prize is the person who identifies as Beverly. Just end the screen share there. So well done, Beverly. Congratulations on that one. Round of applause to Beverly. Well done. So if you get in touch with myself or Steph via Facebook Messenger, and we'll get your address and things, and we'll get that out to you. Really great pen, and enjoy it. It's I hope you really love that. And then the second run-up winner for tonight, who gets a lovely bottle of the FP UK Robert Oster Special Edition ink, is Noah Masterani. Congratulations, Noah. Great. If anyone's got any questions at all for Ruth, last chance to ask questions, and then I will stop the recording in the meantime. But Ruth, I mean,
how long was your brush when you first bought it?
Oh, there you go. Great question.
That one's fairly new, to be fair. But I'll probably
I
go
just had
through one of them.
visions of like hairs are that long, and you're cutting it every time you've used it, and now
It's got to be quite short to get it right. And unfortunately, like a lot of like brushes here just don't do the trick. They're too soft. Traditionally, the best brushes are made from human hair, but I think we can all agree that's a bit gross and icky, and artificial hair is.
We can talk. I mean, you know. I'll send you a trimmed bag full and see if you can make that into a brush.
Next time you shave, you send us some clippings. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Oh, brilliant. I mean, I used to have a really full head of hair. You'd be amazed, but so,
you donated to a brush factory, right?
so I mean, Ruth, thank you so much for giving up your evening talks. It's been absolutely fascinating. I think we all kind of knew that Urushi pens are these sort of incredibly delicate, unique sort of works of art, and I think we all had a sense of the skill involved. But I think you really bring to life that absolute mastery that you've got, and the skill that you bring to it, and
the immense amount of patience as well you must have, like to do
Yeah.
one pen, and it takes like months and months. I would lose my shit if I something.
Absolutely.
I do lose myself on occasion, and I'm like, I'm going to blowtorch this pen.
It's amazing.
So there you go. To everyone who's watching, you've met the master. Now go and buy her pens. Shibui North. If you Google it, it's the first thing that comes up. I certainly can't wait to receive my Shibui pen. And I think they're seriously impressive works of art. So thank you for bringing them to the fountain.
I mean, on the website, I think things come in and out depending on what I've got, depending on what materials I've got in stock at the time. But if I've done something and you really want it, just get in touch, and I'll give you an idea of the time frame. Because some of the stuff is quite specialist, and I don't always have it, and I can't always get it.
I was going to ask. Sorry.
I was going to say, do you have a current stock